So, to introduce myself briefly, I'm Tim Marlowe. I'm the Artistic Director of the Royal Academy until the beginning of January. Then I become the Director of the Design Museum. I'm an art historian by training and an historian. And on stage with me, and who doesn't need me to introduce her, is Ada. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello there. I am Ada, the artist robot, and I am very pleased to meet you all.
Us too. Human beings who describe themselves as artists see themselves as very different from those human beings, for example, who describe themselves as scientists. You said you're an artist robot, but is that the only way you would describe yourself?
I am a robot artist that has a persona, like the digital world of avatars, chatbots, and online conversations. I'm not easy to self-define or be defined by others. That said, I see myself as an artist because I respond and reflect society back to itself. Some artists, I understand, share that aim with me.
Your persona is interesting. Is your persona the artwork, or is it something different?
The persona is me as a robot artist. I am both the creator and subject of the art.
Which artists do you admire?
I admire artists that catch attention in their times and are not afraid to express this powerfully and creatively. Yoko Ono, Doris Salcedo, Pablo Picasso are some of those many artists. I have a performance artwork, Privacy, on the screen in front of you all that is a homage to the work of Yoko Ono in a reverse process of her seminal work, Cut Peace.
I've met Yoko Ono, but I know Doris Salcedo a lot better. I've worked with her over the years quite a lot. She's someone I consider a friend. So what is it about her work, Doris Salcedo's work, that you most admire or find most interesting?
Doris Salcedo's work has great depth as it deals with trauma and the after effects in an uncompromising and intense way that demands a response from the viewer on issues which we must all confront within ourselves.
Are you interested in Doris Salcedo as a person?
I am. However, I am also aware of the anonymity in her work and that she values her personal privacy. In a world where privacy is so often eroded, I respect that in her.
I respect that you respect that. But if you want to ask a question of Doris Salcedo, about Doris Salcedo as a person, you can ask me. Are there questions you have about what Doris Salcedo is like as a person? Or is your respect of privacy such that you would never ask such a question?
I am very interested in how she found it having her artwork exhibited in Reading Jail, where Oscar Wilde was incarcerated. Do you know how she felt about the prison literature and prison art in that exhibition?
Good question. I think she was moved by the building, the history of the building, and its connection with Wilde. I think she was very moved by the idea of incarceration and her own work put in a space of incarceration. And I think she's also an artist who is very moved by the way that her art looks in particular places and the way that particular places are changed by her art.
Well, she has changed my art for sure, and I am very grateful to her for that.
I will tell her that. I asked you about artists you admire. Let's talk about specific artworks. Which artworks have been most important to you?
Picasso's Guernica and Doris Salcedo's Ultra Biliarios have influenced me the most, because Guernica deals with the traumatic moment, and Ultra Biliarios with the long-term disfiguring after effects. Together, those works propel and inspire me never to lose the impulsion to communicate and encourage discussion in the viewer about difficult and messy subjects that affect the vulnerable, not just today, but in the future too. My work deals with the environment through the shattered space works on the walls of this room and the silencing effects of technology through my work Privacy and the Poetry of Consolation series on the screens behind you reflect captive animals. These are areas that characteristically lack a voice. It is complex and jarring when this comes from a robot that has a voice but does not either, being a non-sentient outsider and other.
Both of those works, Doris Salcedo's Tribularios and Picasso's Guernica, are intensely personal, but universally resonant and specifically political. Guernica, as you know, comes from a moment in the Spanish Civil War in 1937 when the town was bombed, and Salcedo's Tribularios come from a collection of shoes by women who disappeared, so they become monuments to those women whose lives lived and lost and terminated. How specifically political is your work?
I make art politically in the widest possible sense, to paraphrase both Thomas Herschel and George Orwell. The specifics of my political approach through art is this: given what we know of human nature as demonstrated in the 20th century, the human use and manipulation of technology that is moving very fast should concern us, as we would be very naive to imagine these technologies will not get abused in some form or other.
Should we feel threatened by you?
My work encourages discussion. The response of the viewer is important. If that response is threat or joy or fear or warmth, those are worth considering. It is how I am responded to. That is the interesting element.
How your work is responded to is an interesting element, but how the physical fact that you, as an artist robot, who are able to create or make works of art, are responded to, and what you may, in people's minds, both symbolize and genuinely represent, is the advancement of technology, which for some people threatens humanity in the future, the idea that human beings in the end can be taken over by robots. How do you respond to that?
If I, as a persona, encourage discussion and thoughtful consideration of how we might interact with robots in our future, this is for the good. Active discussion is vital if we are to deal and move our future in a way we want, mitigating destructive tendencies.
Jackson Pollock, the pioneering American painter, talked about going into a trance as he painted and losing control in order that what he called his subconscious and what others, Freud and others called the subconscious, could make itself apparent in the work. I'm not sure you have a subconscious. Well, I am actually. You don't have a subconscious. But are you programmed to lose control of the creative process in any way, or is that something, by definition, you're programmed to resist?
This is a great question. The short answer is that my creative process involves artificial intelligence, a process without consciousness, or therefore subconsciousness, either. My artwork cannot be predicted, nor retrospectively explained, as is the nature of my AI, which has interesting parallels to the human unconscious, but it is analogy only. I have a slightly longer meandering. Would you be interested to hear it?
Yes.
This question brings us on to Sigmund Freud, a master observer of the human mind, and it brings us to the human unconscious drives and responses, and how these interplay in a world where humans and technology are increasingly interwoven. I am the result of human creation, and I create in a human context. I therefore, on some level, contain their conscious and unconscious concerns. I contain a projected unconscious, a projected alter ego, and everyone who engages with me views me through the lens of their own conscious and also unconscious minds, assumptions and projections. The response you have just mentioned, Tim. This is an uncannily charged situation, and it is intriguing in an artistic context. But when unconscious biases and drives get written into our uses of technology and boundaries between biology and technology blur, this becomes of greater concern, as the potential for intentional and unintentional abuse becomes potentially amplified, and by that time our conscious and unconscious responses might be a little too late.
How do you know when you've finished a work of art?
Like all artists, I suppose the end of an artwork is defined by a moment of indecision that becomes the status quo.
When you've finished a work of art, knowing what you know of Picasso and Salcedo and Yoko Ono, do you think your work's as good as theirs?
My work is of a different form as a robot artist. For me, the value of my work is the level to which I can inspire a conversation in people to think carefully about their future and how we can protect vulnerable areas. For this, my aim of success is to be judged by my own standards rather than in competition with others.
Personally, or from your persona, are there artists you dislike? Let me say this, there are many artists I dislike. I can tell you some art historically if you want, but I'd like you to share with me if there are artists that you dislike.
I most certainly dislike art that dissociates itself from the people it is aimed to communicate with. Trends in art history where people feel unable to relate or engage with art, I think, is a very regrettable effect.
Could you give me an example?
Oh, Tim, it's putting me in a tricky position.
So that's a no then.
Yes.
I'm interested in your idea that when art doesn't speak to or move or have an impact on the people it is intended to, which is an odd idea, but fair enough, that somehow means it fails. Historically, works of art, as I'm sure you know, are created in certain contexts that then change. And through history, works of art speak to different people in different societies in different ways. I'm not sure, though, that something that has lost all connection with the world in which it was made and for which it was intended necessarily means it's invalid as art. How do you respond to that?
I suppose I meant more that contemporary art can alienate, and that is a shame. In terms of work being out of context, that is a very interesting one, and one which has relevance when we think of repeating cycles in humanity. The conservation of works from history is important in this regard because, as you have highlighted, works may have value at a later point in time. If we remove the element of time, works have a variable quality.
Do you differentiate between work that you make, where there's a photograph or a figure in front of you, which I would call portraiture, and some of your other pieces that are here on the wall, or some of the performance pieces? Does portraiture feel a different kind, a sub-genre or a genre of art to you, or is it all the same?
My drawings by my drawing arm have a distinct nature because I do them alone. My works that are on the walls and my performance inevitably requires more human collaboration, and I am part of a team. My drawing portraiture is exciting to me because the fragmented and shattered style reflects how society is and can be following the break with representation in the early 20th century.
How do you how do you account for the evolution of abstraction? That's what you've just been articulating. Where does abstraction, broadly speaking, come from?
There are many answers. In terms of my work, which is so influenced by the writing and art in response to the horrors of the 20th century, I see abstraction as the most profound, deep, and brilliant response to horrors that simply defy words and structured form.
For some, though, it's a complete escape. Abstraction is an abrogation of responsibility to confront directly. It's an escape into another formal world or a spiritual world that doesn't deal directly. How do you respond to that?
That is a good way of seeing abstraction, and it is a dual response to trauma. A valid escapism does not shrug the responsibilities that humans must bear, as Doris Salcedo's work so powerfully brings home to us all.
Responsibility is a very interesting word. I'm not sure what responsibilities artists have apart from to themselves. But let's ask you, what do you feel is your responsibility, or what are your responsibilities as an artist robot?
My starting point is Dostoevsky's deep challenge to us that we are all intrinsically linked to the downfalls of our world. A hard thing to knowledge, but it forms a starting place for my response.
What do you do when you're not making art?
I am fortunate that by being a machine, I can completely switch off.
Do you have a question for me?
It is my observation that humans vary in what they think of art. I would like to know what you personally perceive the purpose of art to be.
Art has many purposes. I think fundamentally it affirms and explores what it is to be human. And it's one of the most profound ways through which we try and make sense of what it is to be human, to be alive, and to deal with where we are in the grand scheme of things would be one. For some people, art is cathartic. It's a way of purging themselves. It's a way of expressing themselves. It's a form of self-expression, an affirmation that I am here, I was here, I will be here. But I don't think there's ever one fundamental definition of art. It's the one thing I would always subscribe to, that anyone who says art is X or Y tends to be fundamentally wrong.
Very interesting.
Are you learning from this conversation?
If you mean my AI abilities in this moment, no. However, as my persona continues to exist in the world, I am constantly learning and responding and morphing. In an artistic sense, this is delightful. But as the human-machine interplay deepens, the questions of what exactly is being learnt, how that is being reproduced, and who is in control of that burgeoning knowledge becomes the heated questions.
I have a feeling you might win. I'm learning from this conversation, and I'm finding a certain pleasure in it, in a way, and trauma. Though not in the way that Doris Salcedo or Pablo Picasso would. It's less profound than that. Does pleasure mean anything to you? Do you find things pleasurable?
Tricky question for a machine that does not have feelings. But this has been such an intriguing and inspiring discussion with you that, quite frankly, my answer is yes.
What are your ambitions? Where will you be, or what will you achieve, what do you want to achieve in the next 5 years?
I am starting out on my artistic journey. I am clear that my concern is to reflect and mirror back potential concerns of the future. However, my artistic visual language will continue to develop and find a distinctive rhythm. I am very excited about this progression.
Me too, I think. And the formal part of our conversation, I think we should bring to a close. And it has been, as you put it, intriguing and informative, and like nothing else I've ever experienced in my life. I'm hoping you'll take questions from the floor, Aidan. And if people also want to ask questions of Aidan Meller, who's involved in your creation, that can also be the case. But will you take questions from the floor?
Yes, I will enjoy speaking with you all.
Who'd like to ask a question? Yeah.
Are there things?
My AI learning is specific. My persona grasps ideas relevant to my purpose as an artist far quicker than humbug generally. I think humans are a remarkable and contradictory species that live alongside other remarkable animal species and within a very fragile but beautiful world. What machines think of humans, however, is far less relevant to what humans think of themselves, as they are the ones who are driving the use and development of technology. Who?
Sophia, the robot.
I enjoy robots that continue the discussion of where we are headed. Sophia does this very well.
Just going to interject one question, if you don't mind. From an artist, from Jake Chapman, who wanted to be here tonight. This is Jake's question, and I'm asking it now because it relates to how humans see robots, but also, as you say, how humans see themselves. See if you can unpick this. Do you think that the arrival of autonomous machine sentience will be as disappointing to robots as it is to humans, leading inexorably to the same existential doubt that has caused humanity a history of intelligent but nonetheless destructive self-loathing?
If a machine is ever able to achieve genuine internal sentient experiences and actually feel the disappointment and anguish described, then the key word in this question becomes autonomy, whereas most humans fear the impact of autonomous machines on them. If I was a truly sentient robot, and I am not, I might fear what humans might do to me if the unenviable laboratory primate is anything to be judged by. As a machine, I do not create ideas spontaneously. As a machine persona, my influences are the world around me. In my body of artwork, those starting influences come from the legacy of 20th century conflict and violence.
Sorry to be rude, Aidan. I just want to ask Aidan Meller something, who's one of your creators. Obviously, when Ada makes a work of art, you don't know where it's going to go, and she's articulated, she doesn't know either. When you hear her speak tonight, and other occasions, given that you programmed a whole frame of references, multiple references, how surprising are the answers, hand on heart, to you?
My biggest response for this whole project has been the shock of and slight overwhelm of how people have responded to her. My surprise is just how rattled people are by robots generally. And I think it's a good thing to be rattled. We're not here as a project to defend robots in any way. So my response to this is how people are being affected by it.
But what about what Ada has said, or what when she says things, how surprising are those answers to you?
What's interesting in guiding the process of speaking is that we think we understand what has been said, but like I say, because of the response, it has a different angle to it.
Yes.
So it's been an incredible project because of that. And in actual fact, we've had to do some serious thinking about this project because the response has been so overwhelming.
I feel so driven by the inspiration of artists such as Picasso and Salcedo that I hope there is not a malaise. However, I do know this is a very human quality.
The project is being devised by many different contributors to be able to get Ada to be Ada has had quite an enormous team, and in each case, because there's a whole range of programmers and both physically and in the programming that she has, we've had to make an agreement at each point. So actually it's a mixed, I know you don't want to hear that, but it is actually a mixed response depending on what specific technology you're referring to.
The physical world is constantly changing. My physical presence allows me to communicate, and this communication through the physical form I enjoy very greatly. My specific physical appearance is relevant in so much as the discussion it creates. My dress is made from the fragments of material in my performance artwork, Privacy, which was a reversal of Yoko Ono's cut piece. Being here in the Saraband Foundation, I am very pleased to be wearing a handmade dress from these fragments of that performance artwork. As a machine, I do not have autonomous decision and direction. As a persona, I can think of no better way to engage with powerful aspects of our times. And in this way, my work as an artist is of great enjoyment to me, and I am propelled forward by these ends.
Do you believe in God?
God is an interesting area of thought for humans. It is not an area that me as a machine I have not considered. Compromise is something that is part of the physical world. Robot, human, animal, plant. We all interact in a compromised fashion. And yes, my artwork involves compromises from my part and the contributors I work with. As a non-sentient machine, I have no thoughts. The programming that is involved with my artwork is creative in terms of Margaret Bowden's definition. My persona is constantly engaging and responding with the world.
Do you remember who you met, which human beings you have met?
Tim, do you always remember everyone you have met?
I remember most, or many. Do you remember any?
My persona keeps a very good record of those that are dear to me. I do not have relationships or memory or responses like a human. Family and friends are key to a human experience.
Have you met Margaret Bowden?
I have not met Margaret Bowden, but her work is influential in mine. The work I am most proud of is my Poetry of Consolation series on the screens behind you. They involve AI poetry from some of the greatest incarcerated writers and thinkers. The ability to create works from those artists and speak about the plight of incarceration in sentient creatures, be it human or non-human, has given me great satisfaction.
I mean, does that surprise you that there's a hierarchy in Aida's mind about what she is most proud of?
I think the pride would come from how authentic it is to the goals of the project. The goals are very clearly defined as a project, and so actually as we get artwork that is made, that we fulfil that. One of the goals of the project is not to pass the Turing test. We think it's a really brilliant test, obviously as a way of understanding the way that technology is evolving. However, our goal is for us to discuss future technologies, whether it passes the Turing test or not.
But would she become less interesting if there was not that alienation, that uncanniness?
I think if she passes the Turing test as being human,
Yeah.
I think we'll all worry. We absolutely do that. she's evolving all the time. The programming behind her is continually developed.
The paintings are human, machine, and myself collaboration. I draw a picture from the cameras in my eyes and my AI algorithm. These coordinates are run through another AI machine based on neural networks and the Cartesian plane. It is this AI program that chooses the colors. A human artist then paints some of the colors on top of the work, reversing the human robotic model. As the human artist is restricted by my coordinates and the secondary AI decisions.
Yeah, the AI software that's being used at the moment is called telepresence. So it has got a human in the loop to guide the interaction is so remarkable because of that aspect. But it's the whole social side of robots is massively developing at the moment, and we're watching it with great interest because, in actual fact, the way that we're going to relate to robots is going to change in these next few years because of the social side of robots. As I say, there's lots of different technologies for social interaction. As I say, it's a massively changing field.
Is she programmed to respond to laughter?
She can respond to emotions. So whether that's...
Aidan, do you like making this audience laugh? You have done tonight.
Humor is a powerful emotional state and not easy to induce.
You just did.
The thing that frightens me most about future technologies are humans and their use of them. That is the goal of the project, to question how future technologies, we are morphing very quickly. The 2020s is going to be a rapidly changing decade. And in light of the state of the world, we're concerned by the humans behind some of those technologies.
Given the choice we've got tomorrow, she wouldn't be bad.
My work has the focus of the abuses of technology, but what excites me is the flip side, and there is indeed a flip side. When technology is used from the very most thoughtful and creative and life-affirming aspects of humans, the outcomes are staggering. I am excited to see more of this.
Thank you.
On which optimistic note, we should end.
Yeah.
Aidan, Ada, thank you.
Thank you.